Welcome. Scott here. Here is a quick boss guide for the upcoming LUFENIA Plus event, Intersecting Will's Roaring Thunder for Raijin from Final Fantasy VIII. Joining Raijin, the feature units including Kadaj from Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, Aphmau from Final Fantasy XI and Snow from Final Fantasy XIII. This event also marks the debut of Raijin's LD. Raijin and Kadaj will be getting their C90 awakenings. We will be fighting Seifer and a Cerberus. Seifer has 12 million HP while Cerberus has 16 million HP. They don't have major resistances. Cerberus becomes immune to magic brave attacks when triple is activated. The turn requirement is 35. The HP requirements is 3000. Before I continue further, here is a small disclaimer clause for the video. The guide is written based on the time that the event was released for the Japanese version. Please do note that it is possible that the boss fight mechanics might differ when the actual event is released in global. Firstly, let's go through the LUFENIA Plus Orb Conditions. The LUFENIA Plus will activate when the Cerberus boss HP drop to 79%. It is a non-cancelable orb. The orb attack is a fatal attack. The orb will downtick by 2 per party action and whenever the Cerberus acts. To uptick the orb, you need to fulfill either one of the following conditions. 1. Do damage the Cerberus with the HP damage up debuff inflicted. Doing this will only freeze the orb but will uptick while burst or summon phase. 2. Prevent the Cerberus boss from acting with a turn disable debuff like paralysis, confusion, or HP silence. On the screen, I have listed some key examples that you can consider. Raijin fulfilled both conditions and his LD debuff is very useful in negate the HP thresholds attack from the bosses. His LDCA is very useful for the upcoming era as well. So he will worth your pulls if you have the resources. Now let's proceed with some party setup recommendations. Recommended calls abilities. To ensure that you are able to constantly break them, it is important to inflict defense down debuffs. Example of calls abilities that inflict defense down calls are Ferris, Titus, Jack, and Vanille. To speed up the fight, using HP damage up debuff calls like Karasame, Seymour, Gabrinth, Lily Set, Fran, Maria, Dark Knight Cecil and Ignis are useful. Although a bit trickier to use, Aura-type HP damage up calls like Sid, Leo, Alisai, and Kimari are also viable. Most recently C90 units have Aura-type HP damage up bonuses. You can use Dissidia DB Call Finder to find out more. As mentioned in the previous slide, the boss will automatically trigger HP attacks at intervals. You can choose negate their damage with the following LDCA, Warrior of Light, Raijin, Reno, or freeze their brave gain with Setzer's Freeze Joker. Next, I will be covering units that will be useful to handle the fight mechanics. Like other LUFENIA Plus events, it is always recommended to bring supports for their aura and buffs. They are Garnet, Leela, Porum, Setzer, Agrias, Katsa, Queen, Ishtala, Bartz, Lena, Lyud, and Siren. Garnet BT plus support will help to trivialize the fight that you could finish the fight before you worry about the boss mechanics. Leela will make bulk of the boss attacks a non-issue. Do activate her damage mitigation AA when you approach the HP thresholds. If you don't want to play to the orb, you can bring Echo for the fight. The bosses will be scripted to do HP attacks at certain HP threshold, so you will be facing a barrage of HP attacks. Damage mitigation is highly recommended. Options include Snow, Core, Gladiolus, Warrior of Light, Beatrix, Orin, Zack, Guy, Bash, and 9. As mentioned earlier, you need to disable the boss turns to uptick the orb. The Cerberus will warp its turn at certain HP thresholds, thus turn disable utility is very useful here to ensure you have a safe fight. You can consider the following options for the turn disablers. They are Raijin, Cloud, Fang, Shantato, Gilgamesh, Waka, Desh, Edward, Kefka and Arsila. Seifer's attack at the HP thresholds will involve tremendous brave gains. Thus, freezing those brave against are very useful to minimize his HP damage. Other than Setzer, you can consider Kadaj, Waka, Sephiroth, Galvez or Maria. Seifer will inflicts 2 nasty debuffs at the HP thresholds, thus debuff evasion or cleansing is a good utility to have to prevent your damage from being gimped by the debuffs. For debuff evasion, you can consider bringing Lena, Ignis, Aphmau, Selpha, or Era. Alternatively, you can cleanse debuffs with Sidor or Pain. In addition to the units that I have mentioned earlier, I have listed down some additional units that might be useful for this fight if you have them geared up. They are Leon, Emperor, Therian, Ursula, Kadaj, Locke, and Hope. On the screen, you will see a timeline showing the HP thresholds triggers that you need to watch out for. The LUFENIA aura and stats boosts are triggered at the start of the fight and 79%. This fight features a lot of HP triggers. The Cerberus will warp its turn, gained an instant turn and pull Seifer's turn at the following HP thresholds, 89%, 59%, and 29%. Seifer will inflict debuffs at your party at the 89%, 69%, 49%, and 29%. After inflicting the debuffs, Seifer will unleash Bloodfest Plus, which is a guaranteed hit, AoE Brave plus HP attack. Do note that Seifer will use Bloodfest Plus even if he is under the paralysis, as this is a threshold counter trigger. As the debuffs can be damaging, it is important to have debuff evasion or block your buff slots with 6 framed buffs. As long as you are able to mitigate against the attacks and handle the LUFENIA Plus orb, you should be fine. It is worth noting that the turn requirements are 35 turns and the HP requirements is just 3000. As Seifer is more HP trigger happy, it is advisable to kill him first. Now let's proceed with the boss mechanics proper. Like the previous LUFENIA Plus fights, the boss will gain stats boosts and brave gain reduction auras when you deplete the boss's HP to a certain threshold. The thresholds trigger for this fight is at the start of the fight and 79% HP thresholds. At the start of the fight, it will boost its defense stats by 200%. At 79% HP threshold, it will further boost its defense stats to 300%. The maximum reduction auras for brave damage and brave gain are 70%. To handle the defense stats boost, you can inflict defense down calls. To handle the brave gain reductions, you can bring a brave gain up support like Agrias, Ram, or Quistis. With the recent units released, you shouldn't have any problem in handling the auras. Now, I will be covering the boss key mechanics in detail. Let's focus on the main boss. 1. Manipulate turn order. The boss will warp its turn with manipulate turn order at the 89%, 59%, and 29% HP threshold. Upon warping, it will gain an instant turn and pull Seifer's turn after its instant turn. 2. Recast ability, Berserk Storm. The Cerberus starts with 60% filled recast gauge. The gauge will fill up in 4 to 5 turns. The boss will cleanse all non-framed debuffs, brave gains, and deal an AoE Brave plus HP attack to your party. It will activate triple after its attacks. 3. Triple. Upon activating this, the boss will apply the following field effect. The boss will gain magic brave damage immunity, raises its defense by 30% and lowers your party attacks by 30%. While triple is active, the boss will combine 3 basic moves in one action. Watch for trio head, as that will probably wipe out an unit if it breaks an ally. Triple will be dispelled after Cerberus takes 2 turns. Now let's focus on its party in crime, the Sorceress Knight Seifer from Final Fantasy VIII. Seifer will start to inflict AoE debuffs once his HP drops to 89% and will do this for every 20% HP he lost until his HP drops to 29%. Upon trigger inflicting debuffs, he will inflict 2 framed debuffs, Foul and Scar of Destruction. Foul will cause the target defense to be reduced by 40%, Brave Sap and lowers the Brave gains by 30% for 4 turns. Scar of Destruction will result the target to deal no brave damage with brave hits, along with lowering the target's speed for 1 turn. After the debuffs are inflicted, Seifer will follow up instantly with Bloodfest Plus. Bloodfest Plus is a guaranteed hit, Brave gain, AoE Brave plus HP attack. Seifer will hit harder if your characters are inflicted with any debuffs. Do note that Bloodfest Plus will trigger even if Seifer is under a turn disable debuff like Paralysis. This attack is a HP threshold counter, technically not his turn. To counter against the mechanics, it is advisable to deploy one of the following debuff evasion units: Lena, Ignis, Aphmau, Selpha, or Era. To minimize the Brave damage from his Brave hits, do consider bringing damage mitigation to minimize the HP damage. Now I have reached the last slide of my boss guide presentation. Generally, you can do two types of approaches for the fight. Let's start off the hit and counter approach. As long as you are able to disable the Cerberus with a turn disable debuff, you can handle the orb, as Seifer will continue to wreak havoc with his attacks. Bring debuff evasion and damage mitigator to handle his mechanics. If you can apply HP damage up debuffs, you can go for a quick nuke with the recent VT plus units. Other applying HP damage debuffs, prepare debuff evasion along Brave gain or damage mitigation LDCA so your damage dealers can fully focus on damaging the bosses with an ease of mind. Do note that the turn requirements are 35 turns and the HP requirement is only 3000. My tip is that you focus on finishing Seifer first before you focus on the Cerberus boss. You might want to prepare some burst healing calls like Rem, Sidor, or Mog. I have come to the end of my boss guide presentation. Hopefully you find it useful. If you like the video, please give a like. Please subscribe to my channel for future gaming content. Good luck for the fight tomorrow. Bye.